All right, this is our lecture on blood for chapter 11. Please remember your textbook is an excellent resource to help you with anything that you might need assistance with when going through the blood unit. Blood is divided into two different parts, and those two different parts are what we call the plasma and the formed elements. So you can see that here in my graphic that we have our plasma making up about 55% of our blood volume. And then we have formed elements. And today we're going to focus on these formed elements. Okay. Now, the formed elements come from stem cells. And I need you to understand what stem cells are. So this is just a basic graphic to show you that when you are a developing fetus, okay, so it becomes a fetus here. Before you become what we consider a fetus, you are a blastocyst. And in that blastocyst, you have pluripotent inner mass cells. And those cells can differentiate and become any part of our different systems. Okay, so pluripotent means that they can go into any of our tissues. Remember, we have 4 different types of tissues. And once they have converted to what type of tissue they're going to go to, they then are considered unipotent, meaning that they're only good now for one system. Okay, so you need to understand what stem cells are, because once these cells have become specialized, they are then going to become one of 7 things. Okay, so here we have our red blood cells. Here we have something called platelets, which I'll describe. And then we have 5 white blood cells. And again, those are known as the formed elements. So formed elements are all the blood cells which come from stem cells. And this is, of course, produced in your red marrow. Your red marrow is where your blood is made. Okay, so when we're looking at the composition of blood, 55% is the plasma, and we are not going to be discussing plasma today. That will be another lecture all on its own. Today, I'm just going to talk about the making of the red blood cells and the white blood cells. Okay, now when we look at this, we can look at it a different way. It just depends on what the picture is looking at. So if it comes in a vial and it has been separated in something we call a centrifuge, then it looks like this. Okay, but if we look at whole blood, that would be this right here. It shows the plasma. And then here it shows those 7 things, the 5 white blood cells that I mentioned, the red blood cells, and the platelets. Okay, so platelets is one part, erythrocytes or red blood cells is the second part, and then leukocytes, there's 5 different leukocytes. So that's where we get that number 7. Okay, so we're going to, again, focus right now on these red blood cells. And notice this hemocytoblast here at the top. That is the stem cell that it's going to be in your red marrow. And it is going to, through chemical signals, decide, does it need to come this way and make one of these parts here? Notice the arrows split right here. Okay, or is it going to go this way and make a lymphocyte? Okay, so if it goes this direction, only lymphocytes are the outcome. But if it goes this direction, it can go a number of different ways. Here, it comes down here and can make platelets, or it comes down this side and becomes a red blood cell, or it can shoot off in this direction and then become one of these 4 white blood cells. Okay, so we're going to focus first on the erythrocytes. Your erythrocytes are very, very small. Very, very small. These are micro units, okay? And you'll notice that it's thinner here in the middle and thicker out to the side. We kind of call this a donut shape, but there's no hole. When we look at it under the microscope, we can see the little light coming through the center of these, because the center of the red blood cell is very, very thin, so the light comes through underneath, okay? And then you might see some of these little guys here, these little specks in here. Those are something we're going to get to later, but those are what are called your platelets, okay? So again, red blood cells are just these. When we look at pictures of blood samples, we can pick out the red blood cells and the white blood cells pretty easily, okay? So here we can see a bunch of red blood cells. This right here that I'm circling right now is a white blood cell. A white blood cell. Okay, so look at the difference. Lots and lots of red blood cells, not so many white blood cells. Okay, so the volume of red blood cells to white blood cells, well, it's a lot different. 41% of your blood is going to be red blood cells, and only 4% is going to be white blood cells. Okay. So red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. They carry the gases that are necessary to exchange with the lungs, okay? And they are biconcave shaped, meaning that they cave in on both sides, okay? Anucleate means they do not have a nucleus. The red blood cell, during its production, will have genetic information up to a certain point, and then that genetic information is kicked out, because the red blood cell's only job is to carry gases. And if it is carrying DNA, then that is something that it doesn't necessarily need to carry. So it gets rid of it, okay? So anucleate, there's no nucleus in a red blood cell. When your body makes blood cells, your blood cell is going to live for about 120 days. I know that President Biden is just celebrating his 100th day in office, so you've had all of your blood cells since about the beginning of January, okay? Males usually have more red blood cells than females, and that is because they have a greater caloric consumption, meaning they need more oxygen, okay? So these numbers here get silly. You do need to know that we say that about 5 million red blood cells per cubic millimeter. So I want you guys to think about what is a cubic millimeter. I'm going to draw a little picture here. And my little picture here is going to be of a box. And I want you to imagine that my box is 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, okay? And if I were to put 1 drop of blood, approximately, maybe 2 drops of blood, into this cubic millimeter, that's the amount of blood we're talking about. Cubic millimeter. Imagine cutting one of your fingernails, maybe one of your thicker fingernails. Imagine cutting it into a little cube. That's how much blood we're talking about here. It's a very, very little amount of blood. And that blood is going to have about 5.5 million red blood cells if you're a male, and about 4.75 if you're a female, okay? For a total of about 30 trillion red blood cells in an adult. Trillions and billions is a different concept altogether. Interestingly enough, I usually ask how long ago was 1,000,000 seconds versus 1,000,000,000 seconds versus 1,000,000,000,000 seconds. 1,000,000 seconds ago was 11 years. 1,000,000,000 seconds ago was 32 years. And 1,000,000,000,000 seconds ago was over 30,000 years. So when we talk about trillions, trillions a much, much larger number than billions. Okay, so how do we know how to produce red blood cells? Well, we have a process called erythropoiesis. And erythropoiesis is stimulated by low blood oxygen. When you have low blood oxygen, your bone cells pick up on that decrease in oxygen, and it stimulates a hormone to be released. That hormone is called erythropoietin, and that erythropoietin goes to the red marrow. The kidneys release it. It travels to the red marrow and stimulates those stem cells to create more red blood cells. Okay, super important. Now, what about these red blood cells? These red blood cells are based in hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is known as HB. This is the oxygen carrier inside the red blood cell. Okay, so if I were to ask you what part of a car holds the gas, you would say the gas tank. What part of the car makes it move down the road? Well, the tires transfer the energy from the engine to the road. Okay, so when we talk about the job of the hemoglobin, it is going to be the oxygen carrier inside the red blood cell. And if I look at this chemical right here, hopefully you remember Fe is that iron, and then lots of hydrogen and carbon out here. You guys know that when we breathe in oxygen and we eat food, right? Notice there's not really a lot of oxygen here. There is some, but this is going to be attracted. Oxygen is going to be attracted to this molecule, and the oxygen is going to be held on by this hemoglobin-based molecule. So this is why if you don't get enough iron in your diet, you feel tired because your body can't carry that oxygen. Now, one red blood cell, one red blood cell. Remember, you have about 5 million per cubic millimeter. Remember that little millimeter box. A little cube of your fingernail size is going to contain 280 million hemoglobin molecules. And each molecule can carry 4 oxygen molecules. This means that each red blood cell can carry about 1 billion red blood cells. I'm sorry, 1 billion oxygen molecules, okay? So iron, again, it's the center of the hemoglobin. It is what allows our red blood cells to carry that oxygen. Males have more than females. Usually it's because of body size, all right? Anemia is when you do not have enough iron in your diet, and therefore you don't have enough oxygen and you feel tired. You consume the oxygen you have very quickly, and you don't feel well, okay? So if you're ever anemic, the first place to go is to your carrots and spinach and beans, okay? You want to avoid animal products in large quantities, right? It's okay to have some red meat. It's okay to have salmon and tuna, but it's something that you don't want to eat every day. Can you eat beans every day? Yes. How about carrots every day? Yes. How about spinach every day? Yes. Okay, but you definitely don't want to be eating liver or eating egg yolks every day. Okay, you don't want to be eating red meat every day. That would be not good for your system. Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here, and this is going to end part 1 of this video. There will be a second video over white blood cells, and I will put that up right next to this video. So remember, we have now talked about the fact that blood is basically characterized as plasma or formed elements. With those formed elements, your body can make 7 different things. There is 5 here. There are platelets up here. and there are red blood cells down here. So that's a total of 7 things. 5, 6, 7. All right, so 7 things are considered to be our formed elements. Those formed elements come from hemocytoblasts, which are in our red marrow. Okay, white blood cell lecture coming next. Thanks for watching.